Hey guys, it's Zach back with another review, this time of the Teevolution Genesis pads. Their first two mouse pads, the Axis and the Gravis. They've decided to go with two different surfaces in their first round of pads, one on the balanced side and one definitely on the more controlled side. It's exciting to see Teevolution getting into the mousepad game, especially after the great success that was the launch of the Teevolution Terra, but the question remains, can they move into the mousepad market with the same level of success? Let's find out. So here we have it, the Genesis line of mouse pads from Teevolution. I think this is just the start of a series of pads they're going to come out with. Pretty exciting to see them get into this space. And let's talk a little bit about the two pads that we have here today. The Axis, sort of balanced, speed-leaning hybrid pad, I would call it. And then also the Gravis, which, as you might be able to tell here, a very unique surface. It is a shockingly slow pad. One that I've had a very interesting time testing. Maybe not my favorite sort of pad, but I think it has utility, and I think there are some people who it will really appeal to. But before we jump into the specifics, let's take a look at the overall release of this whole Genesis series of peripherals. So as you can see here, they plan on this being not only some mouse pads, but also an arm sleeve, an accessories pack, as well as glass skates that are on the way. It seems it took around 6 months developing these mouse pads, choosing every aspect very carefully, and apparently even developing some of this in-house, which I find to be pretty interesting. The Axis, which is meant to have a perfect harmony of speed and accuracy, by definition a balanced pad, and I find that to definitely be the case. Very versatile, sort of like an all-rounder. And then the Gravis, which in my opinion is the muddiest of mud. Just a side note, you'll see on my pad that all this information is listed in the top left. I believe this is below surface, bottom left, minimally bottom left on the final product. The one I have here is a prototype. You don't have to worry about your mouse running into this on the top left part of the pad. And then the Gravis here, the slowest of the slow, the muddiest pad that I've ever used. Claims to be the world's most controlled pad. Would love to test this against the Jupiter Pro. Might pick one up just to do that. Don't have one right now. I'll talk about a lot of the features. They also claim some very nice moisture resistance. And yeah, these pads will be dropping on October 17th worldwide. They come in at $40. And without further ado, let's jump right into them. So again, this is the Axis pad. This is the part of the pad that I was talking about is not up here. It's bottom left on the final product. You can see they are 450 by 400. That is a starting size. They are willing to go to larger 490 by 420 or 500 by 500 sizes, depending on how successful this launch is. The base is 5 millimeters thick. We'll talk about that in a bit. It is very plush. Equita is like just them sort of renaming the surface. It's a cloth surface. Equita, equal, equator, I believe, balance, something to that effect. Then the base is silicone. This Axis pad, I tested a little bit more because it was more comfortable for me to use in all the games that I play. Aim Trainers, Fortnite, used it for some Battlefield 6, even a bit of Gunfire Reborn recently. These pads are only releasing in black to begin with, and like I said, this part also bottom left on the release. The surface of this pad is relatively smooth, but there is some textural feedback. It's not abrasive in any way, but it's also not like nylon pad smooth, for example. There is a difference in x-axis to y-axis speed, as you'd expect, the x-axis being faster. The glide on this is relatively quick. You can see I didn't apply very much pressure there, and it sort of glides all the way across the pad. Static friction, not too crazy either. They're pretty imbalanced, I would say. Appropriate, given the type of pad this is. As far as the performance of the pad, I found this to be very similar to the Blitz that I have from La Honda. The Blitz being a pad that comes in around 10, maybe 15% faster than like your average speed you would find on an Artisan Zero. Zero sort of touted as a control pad, really more of a balance. You could even say it leans towards a speed pad on a mid base. I didn't do in-depth scientific testing on glide yet, but I found this to be very similar in its attributes to the Blitz, which is one of my favorite pads that doesn't qualify necessarily as a speed pad, but is definitely not control. It's that perfect middle ground you could use for any game. Speaking of the base, let's see it here, and you can see it's very adhesive. It's picked up a lot of the dust and debris that's been around my desk. I do stack some pads sometimes for storage. It's not great. This is a silicone base. It is one of the stickiest bases I've ever felt. Also has a topographic design, as well as the Teevolution logo here. This will stick the heck to your desk and it will not move. So if that's ever a concern of yours, drop those concerns. They're gone. The pad is also 5 millimeters thick here. But as you can see here, it's not really like flaring up as I press down. For what it's worth, even though this qualifies as probably like a soft base, it takes a little bit of pressure to actually dig into it. And it's not like you sink in like a plush pilloway like Artisan. It's more of a firm softness. I don't really know if that makes sense how I'm describing it. But basically what I'm saying here is it doesn't qualify as a mid base, and you can press down to get control, but you're not going to get crazy control when you press down. Like, it's not providing that super plush, like on-demand crazy stopping power unless you really push down, which I found nice. Let me keep the glide on this pad very consistent. Helped sort of with the times in game where I try to bear down too much and apply pressure, and then it slows down my glide, throws off my aim, throws off my flicks, etc. So I found it to be a very good attribute. Grabbing my IPI cheat dongle, you can see there is some give here, but it's not as crazy as like the Mouse 1 squishy that I just reviewed. It will sink into the pad, but just not crazy. Like, a lot of the thickness of the base is actually the silicone, and I feel like it's harder to press into that silicone than you might expect. The stitching on this unit, at least, I found to be very tight and absolutely flawless. I don't have any macro shots that I can show you. However, no issues anywhere on the surface. The stitching here on the edges is below the surface, so no issues running into that edge with your arm. Did not notice any discomfort at all when pressing my arm into the pad like that. Overall, just a very well made pad. Obviously, no art on this pad. It's just black for now. I can see them expanding into different art maybe if these pads really catch on and they expand the line to new sizes, new bases, new arts. And overall, this is definitely a pad that I can main. I will not be maining it right now because I just have this thing where I need my pads to be like at least 490, if not 500 millimeters wide. Teevolution is aware of this sort of preference within the community, but they wanted to start smaller and sort of see if they could gain some traction with these pads. I do wish they had gone for at least 490 by 420 because that extra 40 millimeters in the width with my 46 cm for 360 sensitivity just really like, I really need that, especially if I'm doing something like smooth bot, a tracking scenario. The 400 millimeter height, I don't mind it. Obviously, I prefer 420. 500 is amazing. Anything bigger than that, like you've got me, I'm sold. But again, a very maintainable surface, relatively quick, on par with something like the Blitz, and honestly, less textured than the Blitz, and a pad that even though I said I won't main it, I'll probably still play around with it because I am curious how it performs overall compared to the Blitz long term, which is a pad that I have mained in the past. Now, jumping straight into the mud pit, that is the Gravis. The Gravis gravity, keeping you sort of grounded, and that is exactly what this pad does. Bringing this up here, Tracta is the name they've selected for the surface, but otherwise we have same size, same thickness, same comically sticky base here. Just to sort of demonstrate that base, like I'm pushing on the bottom of the pad here, it's not moving. Even just straight up pushing at the bottom, it barely ever moves. Anything else like this, it's absolutely locked in place. Now the surface and the texture of this pad is interesting. It almost feels like a suede microfiber cloth, I guess is the best way that I could describe the feeling of this surface. Like it is almost sticky to my arm. It's a little bit humid in here right now, and my goodness, is this slow. But let's check out the glide. This is the Rapoo VT7. These are not the slowest skates. Dead in the water. If I press this as fast as I can, that's as far as I can get it. I cannot get it across the entire pad even. Static friction is present, but I would say it's not quite as insane as the dynamic friction. The dynamic friction is just absolutely ridiculous. Once you get going, there's a little bit more freer movement, but when you get started, very, very slow. And up and down here, you can tell the y-axis a little bit slower than the x as well. I will say I did play with this pad some in mostly Kovacs, and I was able to perform, unsurprisingly, very good in static. For what it's worth, I'm not great at static scenarios, and a pad that's this slow, it just sort of like makes up for my deficiencies as far as accurately flicking and all that stuff. Smoothbot, I was actually able to adapt. It's just like lowering your sensitivity. Basically, I could score in like the 43, 4400s in the intermediate S4 voltaic smoothbot scenario. So like I can perform on it, but I will say it's not my preferred type of pad. It's not like really fun to play on. I just prefer speed. This actually felt like almost like a forearm workout for me to get where I wanted to go. But I think some people are actually looking for that pad, and it's really cool that Teevolution has made a pad this slow because it's not something that's normal in the market. They made their all-arounder, and now they're going out on a limb and making something that is just kind of crazy slow. You can see it does mark up here a little bit with like that was probably my wedding ring, but you can sort of like rub that out and you won't really see it as much. There were some marks from the packaging. For example, you can see my finger here also leaves a mark, but you can just sort of rub that out. It's just a crazy unique surface though. It's not at all what I expected to get from them. Cool that they made it, and I know there's a subsect of people who just love mud pads. This is undoubtedly a mud pad, probably geared towards those TAC FPS shooters. The Gravis, for what it's worth, feels like it's a little bit softer with this base, a little bit easier to press into than the Axis was. Quick sort of dongle test here. You can see a little bit more give there, a little more plush as it sinks into the pad surface. Just a quick relative demonstration again. Here's the Axis standard glide test. Just like, oh yeah, we're flipping across the pad. Good. Back to the Gravis. Whoop, and we're done. The Gravis is 10, for example. This has Ultra Glide ices on it. 5 of these dots. Still not go a little bit faster, not going anywhere. Even speed skates feel controlled. I will say this was much more usable with these speed dots. Like it didn't feel quite as muddy. I could use it, but that tug you feel when you're changing directions is it's something else. And then, for example, this is the Incot 039 review coming soon. These skates are a little bit on the slower side and just dead in the water, mud. You're not going to overflick, I don't think, unless you're compensating for how slow the pad is. As you've noticed, I've been regularly cleaning things off the pad. The properties that make the pad so slow also do cause it to pick up some like hair and debris pretty easily. It's not nearly as visible. I have quite a crazy backlight going on right here that's sort of highlighting it. Looking down myself, it doesn't really stick out to me nearly as much. Stuff on a pad, on a mouse, always shows much more clearly on a camera. Do note, you probably want to wipe this off with a cloth of some sort every now and then. So what are my overall thoughts on this Genesis line of pads from Teevolution? I'm excited to see that they're making pads. Again, I do wish it came out in a little bit of a larger size, but they are open to that in the future. The base thickness doesn't really bother me because I think a lot of that thickness comes from the silicone, and I don't sink into this nearly as much as you expect an X soft pad. You can see there is give there. Nothing insane though. The Axis, a nice all-arounder, and the Gravis, of course, that mud pad. They have said already as well in the media kit that there is a speed pad in the works. Super stoked to actually try that out. I'm curious what kind of surface they go with. Is it like another Raiden? Is it something like the AC Pro Mid that's faster but not necessarily the most smooth pad? We'll have to wait and see. The base is very sticky. It's not something that I ever have a huge huge problem with. Wood surface I have here is relatively friendly with a lot of pad bases, but like sometimes you do run across a pad that moves. You're not going to have that problem here. And the last thing I would say is the price. So these come in at $40. They were actually packaged like I was receiving like the crown jewel. I got a gift from a king. They were in a couple of different boxes. The box that I made on it, it was wrapped inside that box. So I will say maybe that contributed a bit to the price, but at $40, it's a little bit of a tall ask in my estimation. 40 is not outrageous by any means. And if this was like a 490 by 420, I would say that's about appropriately priced. For example, the 500 by 400 mouse one that I just reviewed was $50 on Amazon. Also not the cheapest pad. I do think the quality of the pad does warrant the price as far as like artisan, not artisan the brand, but like just well-made pads go. But in the market, it might be a little bit high. I'll have to leave that up to you. As far as these pads go, performance-wise, experience-wise, full recommendation. They're flawless. The only issue I had in testing was that this is raised text and my mouse hit it, but again, not a problem. It's down in the bottom left on the final version. I would assume below the surface, but I'm not sure on that because I obviously don't have the final version. Obviously, I mentioned they have glass skates, a sleeve. I'm very interested to try that sleeve. Always looking for a sleeve that can work on cloth, glass, both to see what they're like. I've really only had Pulsar so far. I really need to expand my horizons in sleeves. But regardless, this whole Genesis line of pads from Teevolution, exciting to see them go that way. Obviously, they released the Terra Pro previously, their G703 clone, and that was a banger of a mouse. Almost flawless, huge, lightweight, felt amazing. Would love to see what direction their mice are going in next. I don't actually have the Terra Pro in here. I displayed it if I did, but it's on loan to a friend because they liked it so much. But anyway, excited to see Teevolution moving in a new direction. Absolutely high quality, well-made pads from them. Very curious to see how well they do, what reception this is met with, and just a huge shout out to Teevolution for giving me these early prototype units to test. Never had that before on a pad. Pretty cool, very appreciative. And with that, please subscribe and like if you enjoyed the video. You can find me on X at Dasterzak. Check out the Mousecast podcast. Join up in my peripheral Discord server. And with that, we'll see you.